everyone, and welcome to a brand new spoiler review for the final episode of possibly season 1 of Skeleton Crew here, brought to you by the
Geek Buddies!
Hey! Another fun Geek Bites in store for you today as we jump into episode 8 here. The Real Good Guys, directed by John Watts and written by Christopher Ford and John Watts, who were the showrunners for this entire series. What an interesting finale here. 41 minutes overall with credits. A lot of action sequences with the kids. A lot of 80s vibes. Taking off on hoverbikes. Wendell and Wim getting to be a part of the adventure. Fern and Farah versus Jod up there, the reveal of the supervisor, and the reveal of Jod's backstory. So a lot was covered here, along with all of the action, and then the episode was over, and we're moving on. So, Michael, your thoughts overall on this episode 8 finale? Did this work for you? Did this wrap up the series really well?
Well, coming out of last week, I was a little bit worried. I was like, are they really going to be able to stick the landing? They got a lot to do to really make this feel satisfying, make the kids feel heroic, give us all the information. Like, they were going to have to come out of the gate going and just have a full episode that just went all out from beginning to end. And fortunately, for the most part, they did. It was actually a very, very satisfying finale. I watched it last night with a buddy. I watched it this morning, and it's really great. I mean, Skeleton Crew is a great show. I think I have a couple minor quibbles. The biggest one, which John kind of alluded to, and we'll get into it more, is that needed about 5 more minutes. Needed about 5 more minutes there at the end.
I agree.
Yes. And there actually is not just it was not long enough. There actually is a very specific thing that I think they are missing in this episode to make it fully work for the hero's journey that these kids went on. But we'll get to that in a minute. But other than that final bit, which we'll get into, I thought they did a really great job of each kid having their moment to shine. I thought they did a really great job of calling back to the previous episode so that a lot of the little bits and pieces that happened in episodes 3, 4, 5, 6 kind of came back and were important to the finale. And it really felt like Star Wars, but it felt fresh and new. And as far as for what Skeleton Crew set out to do, I think they were 99.9% successful.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I agreed with most of what you said, Mike. I'll have my thoughts in a second. But Shannon, you first. What is your overall thoughts on this episode? Did it work for you? Did it not work for you? Did it hit the tones that you wanted it to hit? Did it cover the things you wanted it to cover or not?
I mean, this is the bike chase at the end of ET. I mean, in terms of action, 100%. I thought everything worked super, super well. And I thought in terms of closing out the kids' arcs, I thought that all worked really well too. There was, I think Vogel's right, that there were a lot of boxes that they had to check at the end for this to work. And I think they got most of them. I think there were some dangling threads left over, which according to the numbers that people on social media have for some reason, it doesn't seem like we're gonna get a second season of this. So there are definitely questions that I have in terms of the world and where their world goes from here. You find out they've been on an island for decades, and now they're being thrust into this brand new world that has completely moved past them. So I think there was probably a lot of material there, a lot of potential for a second season. Don't know if we're going to get one, but in terms of this story, I thought with the kids, they closed it out really well. I won't disagree that the end kind of felt like you ran into a wall, but overall, I did really enjoy it, and it's a shame that if these numbers that people on social media are touting are correct, it's a shame that more people haven't seen this show, because again, amongst the Star Wars television series provided by Disney Plus, this is up there. This is one of the tops.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I really enjoyed the finale. Yes, I agree with Michael. I've got some quibbles. And yes, as Michael correctly assessed from my reaction, it felt like we hit that wall, as Shannon said, because my reaction will be up at some point. I literally went, wait, that's it? There's got to be more here. I thought there'd be an extra scene of the kids coming together and talking about stuff. But yeah, you sense that, Mike? Yeah.
I was like I said, I was watching it with my friend, and it got to the end, and we're watching the credits, and I'm kind of sitting there, and he's like, "Are we watching all the credits?" I'm like, it's like I was digging for gold. I was like, "There's got to be one more piece somewhere. Hold on, there's got to be something else."
They're showing the Polish voiceover names. There's no way there's anything left after this.
It's like maybe after we get through Sweden and Denmark, maybe we're gonna see something.
Just hold on. But yeah, no, I love the energy of this episode. This was so much fun. As I said over and over again, as an 80s kid, this is my energy, this is my vibe, and I thought it really worked. I liked the way the kids got a chance to, but I like the way that they challenged you as a viewer about John. Like I wanted him dead from the first few moments, and then as things progressively went along, you're like, wait, but is he bad? Is he not bad? Is he gray? And then when you heard the backstory, you're like, oh man, you have to kind of understand where a person comes from, why he's doing the things that he's doing, whether he's right or wrong. So you're challenged as a viewer to decide where you land on John and the actions that he takes, because he threatens the kids, but he never kills the kids, never tries to go after the kids in that extra way that you would think an evil person would. So it leaves you in a kind of a little bit of a gray area about him, which I liked. The special effects I thought were great as well. The explosions of everything, all of that worked. And the hover bike ride chase scenes were so cool, especially women Wendell across the water as they heading to the power station there. Am I a little let down that it was a droid? Yes, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So let's break this thing down in 3 to 4 sections here. Let's talk about everything on the tower. Let's just start from the week, because we pick up right where we left off in the last episode with everybody here on the tower here. You see the kids. They're not happy with Judd basically pushing that narrative that he is a Republic emissary, because they're afraid about things that are going to happen to their parents if they talk. But the kids are essentially ordered to their quarters, confined by the droids. Fern makes a slightly defiant comment, which causes Joe to keep her and Farrah behind to meet the supervisor. We see Wendell and Wim enjoy a microwave dinner at home, talking about his assessment test. Wim is about to reveal stuff, but he talks around it by saying there's people who just want to ruin things. But later, Wim talks with Neil over the radio, and they make a plan to save Fern, but the droids are eavesdropping. So we plant that very clearly, that we got to get rid of the droids for the kids to come together. Meanwhile, John, Fern, and Farrah meet the supervisor. There's dust on everything. There's a weird aura here. And the supervisor is revealed to be a huge droid looking like HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey, but voiced by the nice Stephen Fry. There's also an Oz vibe to the reveal, I think, as well. And yeah, right. And maybe because I'm in the Wicked mindset, it came to forefront. But John introduced himself as a Republic emissary and asked for help to get his other ship through the barrier. But the supervisor calls his bluff about a Jedi, because the last thing you heard from the Republic was that all Jedi were traitors. So which lie is Joe telling? And just when we think that maybe John is going to get captured by these droids, John takes that lightsaber and stabs the droid, essentially shutting everything down on the planet here. And John enlists Farrah help to get the other pirate ship through the barrier, but not before threatening Fern with his lightsaber, which is pretty unsettling. Farrah does it, and then John gets word to Gunter to bring the frigate through the barrier so they can launch their attack on Ad-Ad. So that intro here, Michael, what do you think of this back and forth here with the kids and John, Wim and Wendell being sent off, but Farrah and Fern sticking behind? And they meet the supervisor, which Farrah's like, oh, it's a big deal. But then what Judd does here with the supervisor, and did you like it, that it was an overall droid running everything on the planet?
I think what's great about everything that you just went through is how quickly we get through it. It's like, because like we ended last week's episode, and like I said, when we reviewed it, it's like, all right, so we're in there, we see the giant safe, we see all the credits. Jode has the lightsaber. We're like, okay, so where do we go from here? And all of them sort of right off the bat just believing he's the emissary because he's got a lightsaber, I thought was really smart. It's like, great, he's a Jedi. As far as we all know, Jedi are the good guys. So this guy's got to be the real deal. And him sort of threatening the kids so that they stay quiet. It just sort of allowed everything to go pretty quickly. Like putting the kids in their quarters, taking Fern and Farrah with him because he doesn't quite trust her to keep her mouth shut. It was like, okay, boom, 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 boom. And then getting back, I actually really liked pretty much every interaction between Wim and Wendell in this episode. Like, I thought they did such a good job of taking that relationship. The guy in episode 1 who said, hey, maybe you're a little too old for bedtime stories, getting to go on this adventure with his son just was very, very satisfying. And this whole fight that they have here, where like Wim kind of gets thrown right back into, before the pirates attack, before everything happens, this is the moment where we're like, okay, if everything worked the way it was supposed to work, Wim would be right back where he started. Wim would be, his dad is like, all right, great. We're going to talk to the proctor about getting you to take the test for assessment. And we're going to do this. And Wim and him get in that fight. And it's cut short because Wim can't say, this guy's a pirate. He's a bad guy. But I think the other important part of that scene is really showing like everyone is kind of on board with like, let's just get back to normal. And for Wim, that would not be a satisfying ending to this story. So I loved all of that. And then with Fern and Farah, like I just loved the dynamic between the two of them as everything's happening with the supervisor. You're 100% right that when they walked into the supervisor's office, tower, whatever, definitely Wizard of Oz, like definitely Wizard of Oz vibes. I mean, between Agatha all along doubling down on Wizard of Oz and Wicked coming out, you are right that we all have that on the mind right now, but there's no way to have this door open and walk into this imposing room to see this mysterious figure and not think of it. And doing sort of the Hal Wizard of Oz mashup, I thought was fun. Yeah. As far as the supervisor being a droid, I think this is one of those areas where Star Wars fans can let their imaginations get away from them a little bit. I think that all of it, like there was so many people online that were like, it's the beginnings of the First Order. This is them raising money so that they can bring Palpatine back somehow so he survived. Like there was so many things where we were like, this is going to be these bigger connections. At the end of the day, it makes sense that it was a droid. Like it was, and I think that because the real story here was kids versus pirates, it was like, great, here was the reveal, here was the information, and taking the supervisor off the table. Did they build the mystery up a little too much that maybe people felt let down? Possibly. I think there's definitely, you always run that risk. But what I really liked was kind of tying back to the bigger Star Wars mythology, a droid just goes by the information. Droids like are rule followers, and the final rule they got was, the Jedi all turned on the Republic.
Right.
The Jedi are bad. That was the last thing he got before everything outside went to shit. So I thought that was a really smart way to sort of get things going. Like that moment where he was like, so which part are you lying about? Being an emissary or being a Jedi? I was like, oh, okay, that's clever. I was like, this is good. And then getting to the next level of like, I killed the supervisor, the wizard is dead, and then everything goes to shit, and Farah is forced to we get the information that we need for later, which is there is a way to bring down the entire barrier. Yes. We just do the little, okay, we're not going to do that. And this is where Jode is like, sort of like, to your point, it's like, he just wants the money. Yeah. He's really, yes, he killed Brutus, like execution style, because he hated that dude. And that dude straight up said, I'm going to kill you no matter what. But right. As much as he threatens people with that lightsaber, like deep down, this is not a guy who craves violence. This is not a guy who wants to kill. He just wants his money. He just wants everything to work out so that he can be on top. And so you sort of see that here where he's like, look, I'm going to take the money. It's going to be fine. So I think it set up everything in this very brief opening to then let everything just tumble downhill in a really fun way from this point forward.
He's like a softer Hans Gruber. He just wants the money and to go vacationing. A softer Hans Gruber. Right. He's not going to commit the violence, but if Goodenough wants to kill people, that's a separate thing. Your thoughts, Shannon, overall? Oh no, sorry. What do you think, Shannon, of these moments here between the kids and the parents, and then John with the threats that he has here, and then what happens with the supervisor overall? What do you think of this stuff?
I mean, calling back to the previous episode when they discover that Jod is on the ship with them, and he talks about the fact that he did see that message, that he knows who the kids' parents are now, so he knows who to hurt. And bringing that in, I mean, I thought it was funny the way that the last episode ended, that the parents are all so happy to see their kids. There's Jude Law, bang, lightsaber. You don't typically turn that on as a greeting. But the fact that he turns it off, he's like, hey, I'm the emissary, Jod Nawood. Nice to meet you. Yep, I got your kids. Yeah, they are a little bit of trouble. And I think as adults, there is the instinct in our heads, be like, why aren't the kids saying anything? Why aren't the kids saying anything? It's because this guy threatened their family. And that is where a kid's mind would be in that moment of, I can't say anything. You're going to hurt my mom. You're going to hurt my dad. You're going to hurt my brother. You're going to hurt my sister. So all of the actions make sense. And in terms of how the parents react to Jod, as he is saying, like, when Wendell asks, like, is that necessary? Like, they need to be confined to court? Yeah, it is necessary. They are a society of rule followers. Yeah. And if someone comes in and throws down a rule, someone of a higher status, and at this point, kind of a legendary status, because none of them have seen an emissary. They're like, yeah, this is what we got to do. I love. I think it's Ryan Kiera Armstrong who plays Fern. This is a very bright young performer, and I think we are going to see her quite a bit in the future. I thought she really had some very, very nice moments. I thought all the kids were good. She is the standout. And again, I think this is probably the beginning of a most likely very, very long career. Getting to the TV dinner, the microwavable dinner with Wendell saying nothing like a home-cooked meal. Like, I thought that is such great single dad logic. Like, it is literally in a little disposable tray. And again, you feel like with Wim looking at that droid, knowing like, I can't say anything, and like a little bit slips out, because that's what happens with Wim. He can't keep his mouth shut when he says he's not a Jedi. Like, that's just such a great moment of that sort of, dad is so happy to have his kid back. Kid is so happy to be reunited. But as Vogel said, this is potentially going to go back into that familiar pattern where Wim was ultimately unhappy. Getting to the moment where we do meet Oz, the red-eyed and mechanical. That was just a great reveal. I thought John Watts did a really, really nice job with that, with those details of just like seeing the dust on the chairs. I mean, it's like those little bits of seasoning that make the world feel real. And having Stephen Fry be the voice, like, part of me was just like, oh, is he not? Is Stephen Fry not Tack Renaud? I mean, is he just, that guy's just off the board? Like, who knows when that guy actually got here? But the moment where the droid outsmarts the pirate, where he says, you're lying about one of these things. So like, that is just such a wonderful, satisfying moment when our antagonist gets the rug pulled out from under him. For a minute, because then he takes the lightsaber and stabs him in the eye. And you see the destruction that comes to AT-AT from taking out this one thing. Again, leaning into the pirate stuff, when the ship gets through and you see the pirates coming down on those skiff speeders, it was like watching Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, it was just like that. Yeah! I mean, it was just, again, I had a smile on my face from beginning to end, but especially in this moment, I am just cracking up in all the best ways possible. It's just so well done.
Yeah, I look at it from an 80s perspective, because you guys covered a lot of the great points, so I'm not going to add on too much of that, but it was like a lot of the great 80s stuff, right? This is how we were in the 80s. We followed the teachers. We followed the principals. We felt like you weren't supposed to say anything. So the fact that this society is a society, as you said, Shannon, of rule followers, that's been established from the beginning. We don't question these things. You have to do these things. The teachers listen to the parents listen to the teachers about how, because that's what you get. So the emissary telling the parents, hey, your kids have been doing this. Your kids have been they're a little too much to deal with. And the parents going, we get it. Of course. Yeah, we're sorry. So it's a different approach and mentality. And I thought that they kept that energy correctly throughout this opening stuff. But then slowly but surely you see Fern stepping to the forefront. Even Farrah gives her a look when Fern says something slightly defiant, which I love. It's like, well, I've never seen this side of Fern. Why would she do this or what have you? So I like that that's that energy there. And you're right to bring out the Stouffer's Hungry Man dinner. Kids back then, we used to have shitty microwavable meals, and that's what you were seeing there. So I love that worked in the energy wise. But at the end there with the supervisor, I was surprised it was a droid, but then it made all the sense in the world. Yeah. I was a little anticlimactic about how quickly he was able to dismantle the droid just by sticking a lightsaber in there and then shutting everything down. but you had to push the thing forward to show that the droids weren't going to be able to communicate anymore, so that allowed the kids to communicate. So I got the logic behind it. I would have liked a little bit more with Stephen Fry and Jude Law, but what is one was really smart thing about the show is the second they make you think Jude Law or Judd Law is going to get caught, he quickly turns the tables. And I think that's a great thing about character work they do with him. So, all right, let's move on to the second section here. Women, Wendell, Neil, everyone, they see the ships flying over. As Shannon said, they're all coming out, out of the ships and everything. But they're also shooting down blasters and destroying houses, destroying cars, destroying these people's way of life, in essence. They fired all the citizens. Wim wants to help, but his dad isn't helping him with anything. So Neil and KB show up on their hoverbikes, and we have this awesome chase sequence. Even Wendell chasing after the kids. We see the bully from episode 1 come back as Wendell essentially knocks him off the bike. And then they all go on this massive hoverbike chase, which I think is fantastic. Jump the ravine here. Neil gets shot off his bike, but says to leave him. Leave me. And he'll provide cover for KB with the turbo blaster, just like he had found on at Akron with Hana. And when they get to the Onyx Cinder, though, the docking clamps are on the ship, so they need to turn the power on to release them. Oh, if only we had a level 7 systems coordinator. Oh, wait, we do. Wendell steps up now, and we see later on where they head on off to the supervisor's office. But back in the supervisor's office, Fern comes up with a plan to stop Judd, and as her mom worries that they were supposed to be safe from this stuff, Vera tells her, and this is a really sweet moment, no matter how scary it was out there, they always met good people wherever they were. And God, do we need to hear that story nowadays? Fern tells Farah to distract Judd while she steals a blaster from one of the power down droids. Judd shoots at them to calm down. Judd then blasts out a message to all of Manhattan to follow his orders or else. And Wendell and Wim hover bike into the power station where Judd, Fern, and Farah are there. Wim arrives and tries to fool Judd that the B-Wings are coming, but Judd sees through it. Wim talks about some magical crystal. Sounds familiar. While Fern chimes in that Wim was working with the Jedi, which distracts Judd from Wendell sneaking in, turning on the power, but Judd catches him, and now they're all in Judd's sight. So, Shannon, your thoughts on all the action here and how this all moved in the moving pieces of the separate teams of people doing stuff?
I mean, in the moment, like, again, it's very entertaining to watch the pirate ship come down and the skiffs come down and their blasts and everything. When you think about it from the citizens of Atton's point of view, they have never seen anything like this.
Yes.
They have never seen a big ship come out of the sky. And they've never seen the lights go out, which I thought I was like, oh, that's really interesting. But then you see just their way of life being decimated by these cutthroats. The great 80s moment of how quickly Wendell forgets what his son will do. Like, as he's working in the garage, and literally KB and Neil come up, and, get out of here, kids, go home. You need to go home. And immediately they're gone. Oh, also, Neil gets to get back in the bath. Come on. How sweet
Yes, he does.
He loves that bath. He loves that bath.
He is an elephant alien. They like a body of water.
Yeah.
But the satisfaction with the bully character, like, naturally we didn't get to go back to him because they hadn't been on AT-AT, and the satisfaction of your dad kind of taking on a bully and stealing his bike. Again, that's just 80s Amblin wonderfulness.
Totally.
I love the speeder chase, and as they kind of jump that ravine. It was just heartwarming. It was just so much fun. Getting back to when Judd gets on the intercom and announces, like, you all need to fall in line. You need to do what I say. I mean, again, this is a society of rule followers. Like, this is probably going to work. As the skiff is chasing the kids down, again, it's so Goonies. It's just so 80s. Yeah. And of course, one kid gets left behind, and I'm like, of course, it's Neil. See that they planted earlier with that, that turbo cannon on top of the roof. This was just a very, very well put together episode, and the amount of things that paid off. It was just from a writing standpoint, just a really well put together season. But as kids do, they overplay their hands. So when Fern says, he's working with the Jedi, and John's like, well, I already got some very vital information from Cyclops over here. So knowing that wasn't going to work, I mean, again, just really, really well put together.
Yeah, what do you think, Michael? I mean, we saw them separate out into separate teams here, but the end goal is try to stop Jod from the supervisor's office to outside the supervisor's office. But by the end of this entire section of the show, it is clear that Jod is in charge of the kids, except for KB, who has gotten away, which we'll talk about in the next section. What are your thoughts on all these action sequences and where we ended up by the end of this section of the show?
Well, I think this is where Skeleton Crew is ultimately really successful in that we talked about this, I mentioned this last week, that like in the adventure they had, which was super fun, they were still kids the whole way through. Like there was never a moment where you were like, oh, wow, now they're badasses. But as Shannon said, this is a planet of rule followers. Like the power goes out and Wendell's like, oh, the power's out. I guess the supervisor's going to handle it. Like these people are not equipped to fight back on any level. And you have these 4 kids who have just gone on this adventure where they have been chased and terrorized and broken every possible rule they could. So for them, breaking these rules and being like, fuck it, we got to go, it feels very natural. So what they do doesn't feel like all of a sudden these kids turn into like, it's not like Wim all of a sudden is using the force or anything like that. Like they never overplayed their hand where the kids became too heroic for their own good. But in the context of what was going on here, when Wendell's trying to fix the car and being like, let's just go away because we don't know what I don't know what to do. And Neil and KB show up and Wim's like, oh, sweet, the hoverbikes still work. We got to go. Like, you totally buy it. Like, it 100% works. And then in the 80s, there were 2 things that were really, really awesome in movies. One was that whole bike chase at the end of E.T., and one was the speeder bike chase in Return of the Jedi. And with Skeleton Crew, we got to mash those 2 things up and watch both happen at the same time. And it was hella satisfying. Seeing a bunch of kids basically evade a pirate ship on bicycles, and then even in little ways, like when Wim in the very first episode, when Wim sees Fern and KB take that jump to go into the woods, and then he goes to that same thing, he stops his bike, he lifts it up, he puts it over, like he doesn't take the jump. And here he takes the jump. Like they are all doing it. So it's just really satisfying in both big ways and small ways as they go on this chase. Like them all doing the jump, Wendell being thrilled that he made the jump, even though he's heavier than Wim. Like it was just little fun moment after little fun moment. I kind of wish Neil had stopped and not like actually been knocked off his bike and said, leave me, because he really did immediately right after there go, I have a plan. Like I need to do cover. I think it would have been really more awesome for Neil if he had stopped and like, what are you doing? And he's like, you guys go ahead. I've got an idea. But that is like the minorest of quibbles.
Yeah.
But yeah, then, and in writing standpoint, when what they did in this section doesn't work, it feels too convenient. And when it works great. Like they set up every single one of these things. Like Neil had the moment with Hannah at Akron. He knew about that turbo laser. KB is really good at flying the ship. Kim at the end of her episode said, if you ever need me. They saw the X-Wings on the spa planet, chase off Nanuba or whatever, chase off the bad guys. So like every single piece along the way, all of a sudden just dropped in and everyone got their moment to shine. And it was really, really satisfying. And then when Wim and his dad go up into the supervisor's tower and Wim is giving his whole thing, it's not that the supervisor just gave Jod a piece of information. Like Jod grew up out there. He knows the Jedi he knows what happened to the Jedi. Everyone knows what happened to the Jedi. Like there's no Jedi. Like that doesn't exist anymore. So when Wim comes in talking about, I've got the Jedi on my side, he's like, buddy, there ain't no Jedi. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So they do overshoot on the story, but I do love it. Very much reminded me, this is a more obscure 80s reference, but it's like Willow and his disappearing pig trick. Like Wim just comes in and bullshits. Like Wim is just like, I'm just bullshitting here. And then Fern bullshits with him just long enough for Wendell to do what he does. and it works, and KB gets out. And so every single piece of this is working really well, and each one of the 4 kids is kind of essential to the plan. And then John, the thing that I liked the most, and probably my favorite moment of the episode, is I think when Fern says to her mom, the galaxy, you quoted it exactly, but with the galaxy is a dark and scary place, but every single place that we went, there were good people. That is like one of the core pillars of the DNA of Star Wars.
Yep.
Like Star Wars as a brand. When you read a Star Wars book, when you watch a Star Wars movie, you watch a Star Wars animated series, you play a Star Wars video game, you are in a galaxy that is dangerous and scary, and there are 1,000 people that want to take advantage of you, kill you, use you, and you have to find those few people that are going to take a chance and help you. And so when she said that, like, it hit me right in the feels, because in addition to all the 80s goodness, like, she basically just gave the core, like, thesis statement of what Star Wars should be about. And I think that's where they really, really nailed it with this.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, Michael. You're 100% right. I didn't stretch that out to the DNA of Star Wars, but that is absolutely 100% correct. Yeah, I love the action. I mean, this is great action. This is so much fun. And you guys are right. When the plants work, you're so happy to see them work, because you all of us have seen decades of entertainment. We know when they're laying the plants or seeds for things, and it's how they pay them off, how effectively and organically and believably they pay them off, that makes the difference. And they did throughout this entire section. And I agree with you, Shannon. They make the kids capable enough, not overly capable. And I think you hinted at that as well, Michael. So you're not believing like all of us, because I thought there was a moment when Wynn was going to use the Force, and I was like, oh no, not this. But they didn't do it.
I swear to God, I thought it constantly. I was like, here's where he's going. And I never wanted it to happen. And I kept in my mind being like, he was going to be forced. And I'm like, I'm so glad he wasn't.
Yeah, agreed. And that's what's great. So they had to rely on their instincts as kids and their level of knowledge and ability to fool. And yes, it wasn't enough fully, but it was enough to get Wendell through the door to turn on the power to help KB. So I loved that whole situation. And yes, Wim and Wendell coming together as father and son more and more throughout the last 2 episodes, I thought was really sweet and really good. And Wendell saying, like, I'm a level system 7 cord. We always love that moment when our dad, we've been making fun of our dads, or we think our dads are foolish. We all experience this. And then that moment when your dad like steps up and you're like, oh shit, my dad can really do shit. So I love that.
Dad just got cool. Dad just got cool.
Which I thought was great. So good. All right, let's hit the final section here of the show. So the plan worked to a degree here, enough for the clamps to come off the Onyx Cinder. KB, with the help of a rejuvenated SM-33, he is not gone yet. His head, and Neil using the turbo blaster to distract the pirates. She is able to get out past the barrier to send the coordinates to Kim to request assistance, but she is shot down before she can tell Kim about the barrier. John watches, though, and says, it didn't have to be like this. Wow, interesting. Is he remorseful? And he's worried about he seems like he might be worried about the kids dying. And Fern gets super emotional watching KB's ship land, thinking that she might have died. And Wim is angry. But Jaw does seem remorseful, even though he's brandishing the lightsaber and threatening to kill Wim's father. They attempt to make a break for it for the lever. Then Wim unleashes even more anger towards Jaw. And then finally he says, you're no Jedi, you lied, and now the real good guys are coming. The episode's title there. This unlocks Jaw's traumatic backstory. And now Jawd tells us his backstory. Basically, that he wants his monologue. He was a child, and he was a very poor child. All he cared about was not starving, and that he was found by this female Jedi who was training him, and because he had these abilities, but before he could get fully trained, she was killed right in front of him, which is a pretty brutal thing to experience here. But the children and the parents still have to stop him, though. And he insists that he never wanted to hurt anyone. He doesn't want to damage the planet. He just wants to take control of it. And then Wendell, while John is talking and waxing lyrical, knocks him out again. So second time that John has been knocked down by a punch here.
He George McFlies it. He George McFlies it.
Take your hand. Yeah. So anyway, John drops the lightsaber. Wim grabs it. John shoves Fern around with the Force, and the Wim and Fern try to resist John's attempts to snatch back the lightsaber. Wendell and Farrah go after the lever. In the end, though, Wendell and Farrah overpower John. The barrier is lowered, and the New Republic comes on in with the B-Wings and the X-Wings handling things. They take care of the pirates. The pirates retreat, retreat. Farrah and Wendell and the children make a break for the lift, but not before Wim calls back to John. I think that was so important, not because it's a redemption, but it hints at a redemption, and that was enough for me, who didn't want any redemption for John. The fact that Wim is still a good person, a caring person, the backstory, I think, affected Wim a little bit, so he's able to sense something here that can be redeemed in John. Very Luke, Anakin type of vibe there. But there is no animosity, it seems like, between John and the children by the end here, but we watch as the frigate takes on fire from the New Republic pilots. They destroy everything here, and everything starts crashing down into the planet. From the pirates, the children and the parents make it to the crash site where they find KB and SM-33. And Wim watches as the New Republic pilots zip around over their heads. And that is essentially the end of the episode. So, Michael, your thought, like, boom, black frame. Thanks for coming, guys. So your thoughts here on this final sequences at John's backstory and then this ending.
Well, so I love the way that the stakes get set up in this scene, which is the only way that they can save At-Atten is to change At-Atten forever. Like they're the only way that the X-Wings can get in to help them defeat the pirates is to get rid of the barrier and expose themselves to the entire galaxy. And Fern's mom is like, we can't do like that is the ultimate rule to break for a society of non-rule breakers. And you see with Fern and Farrah this struggle of like, okay, wait, that's a step too far. Like we can't do it. And so I think that was really, really, really interesting to set that up. And then you have just this perfect device for like the way everything is shot. We know what needs to get done. This thing needs to get pulled down. In basic movie lingo, it's like, that's the thing. There we go. And so then you just have everybody kind of battling to get there. And yeah, I really loved the You're No Jedi, and I loved finally getting Jod's story. And I think it's great. Like it's kind of what we were all talking about, but with its own special flavor. Like this is not some guy who was picked by a Jedi, taken to Coruscant, in the Jedi Temple, training to be a Padawan. This happened after all that went down. Like this is a guy who was struggling as the Empire was on the rise, ravaging the galaxy, and he finds this raggedy Jedi who is on the run and hiding, who still takes the time to start to show him a couple things before she gets brutally killed by the Empire. That's great. It's a good play on like the Kanan Jarrus story or the Cal Kestis story. So he kind of Jod now falls into that category, but whereas Kanan or Cal or any of these characters had just enough of the positive experience with the Jedi that they fell to the side of the light, Jod didn't get that. Jod went the other way. He learned just enough Force and Jedi tricks to be useful, but then what he was taught is the universe is shitty, and what he says to Wim is in a way the inverse of what Fern says to her mom. Fern's like the universe, the galaxy is a dangerous and scary place, but everywhere we went there was a couple people that helped us. Jod is like, the galaxy sucks and is shit. And there's pinpricks of light, and if I can grab onto one of those pinpricks of light, I'll kill whoever I need to keep it. So like it's just the inverse. Like it's really good the way they set all that up. All of the battling with the Force and the lightsaber and whatever. I always love when we see something with the Force that I haven't seen before, and I have never seen somebody use the Force to try and break somebody's fingers in the opposite direction. And when I tell you that me and my buddy who I was watching with both screamed at the same time, because there's a moment where the sound effect just goes like crack as the fingers go just a little bit too far in this direction, and I screamed, and I was like, well done, guys. Have never thought of that before. And then with Wim, I do love, ultimately, you have this great moment where Wim does battle a Jedi. I mean, and again, he doesn't do it in a way that is cheesy or over the top or, okay, that's just ridiculous. But like, Jod is distracted. Wim grabs that lightsaber. Jod tries to grab it, and Wim holds on to it. and like holds the lightsaber back from Jod, and then Fern holds onto it too. And you're like, yeah, Wim's fighting a Jedi. Like for all intents and purposes, for what this kid has experienced. And then at that final moment, once everything has been pulled down and Fern's mom helps Wendell and they pull it down, and then Fern is standing there and Wim finally turns the lightsaber on in the right way. It was the exact right amount of a hero moment that was like, okay, Wim got his moment. I can see Wim holding that lightsaber and he's like, stay away from my dad. And you're like, all right, I love it. I disagree with you a little bit, John, about like when Wim said Jod. I know everything that you felt is exactly what they wanted you to feel, and I felt like what Shannon said several episodes back, where it's like Jod was so villainous in the past 2 episodes that I don't know that Wim would say what I don't know that Wim would find that empathy. I think it's great that he did, but I wanted like maybe there needed to be that one more moment or maybe one little tweak differently in that final scene between Wim and Jod, where he had his backstory where Wim saw something, but that's definitely the moment they were going for. And I love that we don't know what happened to Jod. Like I love that they left and he kind of looks out the window and he sees the pirate ship going down and his expression subtly changes. And in my headcanon, I'm like, look, the barrier's gone and there's a lot to deal with. He's for sure grabbing whatever credits he can grab and getting the fuck out of there to pirate another day. Like just like Long John Silver, he's taking off. And then, like as you guys said, we get to the end. KB's fine. SM-33 is fine. Everybody's happy. Everybody hugs. We've got some X-Wings. We got some B-Wings. And Wim looks up. And this is where the final line is, I think, Fern saying, hey, Wim, now you don't need to take the test or whatever it is.
Oh,
now
right,
you don't need to...
The assessment.
And then that's it. And it's like, when I watched it the second time, knowing that was where the end was, you're like, okay, it is satisfying enough. But I think what everyone is inherently missing here is that they have, and it's kind of what Shannon alluded to with the loose threads. And I think it's fine that they left a bunch of loose threads about exactly what happens. But what I think we all really wanted was that, like, it goes to black. And then it's like 3 months later and we see Ad-Atten is being rebuilt and we understand that the Republic is now more involved. We see X-Wings going overhead. Farah is kind of like talking to some Republic person about how Ad-Atten is now going to integrate with the new Republic. And Wim is now explaining to Neil like, oh, so here's what actually happened. And then the Jedi did this. And then like they now have all of this information, which is basically the Star Wars story that we all know. Like the Empire rose up, like Wim should be telling everybody about the rebellion and everything. So like you would get this sense that they have now integrated into the Star Wars universe. And then you could have that moment of like, well, now Wim, what are you going to do now that you can do whatever you want? And he smiles and we don't know what his answer is. And you cut to black or something, that you just get that idea that Ad-Atten is now a part of the Star Wars universe. And it's like they took that little bit away from us. And I think just a really, really quick scene where we saw, here's what life is like on Ad-Atten now, I think would have really, really smoothed that ending over a little bit for everybody.
Yeah. Shannon, your thoughts on all this stuff? And I think what Michael points out real quick, I love that juxtaposition, as you said, between what Farah said and Jod says, right? Jod is darkness with pinpricks of light. So there's 2 ways to go through life. And I think there's a commentary being made there. What do you think, Shannon, about these final scenes and then this rapid end to this entire series?
I mean, across the board, super enjoyed everything. I mean, the moment that you see KB kind of break through the barrier and send out the message to, I know you guys, I know you all reviewed episode 3 when I wasn't here, but the fact that the Kim character is voiced by Leah Shawkat, and had I been here, I would have said Owlia Shawkat.
Well, thank goodness for small favors.
Oh my God.
That's
so great.
But watching KB come back in, you see the ship get hit, and you do get a window into Jod's character, in that he's not bloodthirsty. Like, he's not a sociopath. He doesn't want to kill people just to kill them. Like, he has had to be a survivor his entire life, and he does what he has to do to survive. KB, a kid that he has gone on an adventure with and that he might have a little bit of affection towards. Like, he doesn't hate these children. But knowing that she possibly could have perished as a result of his actions, like, you do see that there is that sliver of humanity. And I don't think, and I don't think it's such a large sliver that it bucks up against the vitriol that we saw from him in the previous episodes. I think those two can exist. There was a moment as Fern and Wim are holding onto the lightsaber and he's trying to force pull it over. I'm like, oh man, is that lightsaber about to start to turn on? Is he about to kill himself?
Yeah,
accidentally. There was a moment that I thought that, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't think this is that show where you see the principal antagonist get a lightsaber through the belly. But the whole sequence was great. I mean, again, I hadn't made the George McFly connection with Wendell, but anytime a guy named Wendell lays you on your ass, I mean, that's a George McFly right there. And also, you know, I don't know if we've really talked about it. Wendell's huge.
Yes, he is. He's a big old nerd.
He is a big dude. And as John has talked about in the past, you get a big nerd, you can get some nerd rage.
Unchecked.
There is a wallop. There's a lot of strength behind that punch. It may not have been the most artistically thrown blow, but you know, there was some force behind it. When you see, like, there are some great shots of Jude Law in this series. And one is when you see that bright light hit, and you kind of see, you know, and this is probably me in my actor writer head, but I'm like, you see the years of struggle on his face in that moment. Like, he's fully in the light. Like, you really see everything that he has had to do to survive. And just at the moment that he thinks he's grabbed the brass ring, it's getting taken away. So I did really like the moment of Wim with the lightsaber. I don't think Jod should have had his blaster, because at the end, that kid ain't blocking. He's not blocking a blaster bolt.
That's fair.
I was like, that blaster shouldn't have been in his hand.
Well, but I think that's important, actually. I mean, I think it's intentional. Like, I think what happens there is, like, you're right. Like, Jod in that moment could have shot everybody.
Absolutely.
Like, he could have been like, all right, you know what? Fuck you. And Wim has the lightsaber. Jod has the blaster. And what does he do with it? He just throws it aside. Like, at the end of the day, this guy's not going to kill these kids.
Yeah.
And I think that was intentional to say, look, this guy threatens a lot. But there's multiple times in this episode when you're watching it that you're like, if this guy was remotely the bloodthirsty guy he's pretending to be, Brutus aside and some of the other stuff he's done, like, he could have killed everybody and said, I'm going to keep the gold. Like, he didn't need to. Like, at the end of the day, it was like, that was his bluff being called, I think.
I get what you're saying, but I think because of what we've seen him do, like, he's released the acid to take out all those pirates. We've seen him off screen shoot Brutus in the head. I think you have to have another weapon trained on him. I get that you want that shot of Wim with the lightsaber because that's a hero shot, but it doesn't. Him tossing the blaster aside, he still has an escape plan if he has a weapon in his hand, and so. I don't know. It didn't totally land for me, even though I agree that you do need that shot. And I think from a character point, I think you are right. But for me personally, that just didn't, I couldn't get that out of my head. It's like, he's still got a weapon. Right. Watching the X-Wings come in, like, that was, again, that's just classic Star Wars. I mean, I was really hoping we were going to see one of those X-Wing pilots from The Mandalorian, someone that had been established. Maybe that guy was. I don't think he is. But then when you see the kids go over and you find out that, you know, KB made it. I mean, again, it's just a very, very satisfying series and a very satisfying end. It's like you're at the end of your meal and you've got that last great bite, and then the waiter comes and takes it away. I think that's that is the 3 months later, 1 year later, whatever. I do think, and again, this is why Vogel gets paid the big bucks. I mean, I think an idea like that really does help the show.
I'll take bigger bucks. I'll take bigger bucks if you have them, but sure.
But I think that's what takes. I mean, this was a really, really good show. And I think a moment like that, even though there are those dangling threads, a moment like that is a satisfying finale, a satisfying conclusion, but it also pretends that there could be something else around the corner. I loved the whim moments of him calling out for Jod, but again, I don't think it didn't quite connect just because of everything that had happened. But overall, super satisfied. I mean, this is number 3 on the Star Wars TV series list.
Oh, Andor Mandalorian?
Yeah. And Skeleton Crew. That makes sense. Yeah, I love the final sequences here. It was really good to see the kids and the parents working together against Jod. I thought that was good because there'd been such separation between them in the first episode, laying out the groundwork of their relationships. I will say one of my big dings on this, and Disney keeps fucking doing this, is this cursory catering to the LGBTQ plus community. The fact that the two moms were constantly only occasionally seen and then subjugated, that was on purpose. That storyline on purpose, and it's so frustrating. Don't present it if you're not going to honor it. Neil's mom as well. I thought that was so strange to see her not even remotely appear to be part of the action in this finale when she had been the one at the facility kind of making to violate the rules here to try to get to that to kind of get the plan together. Then later when they're out to try to put the communication thing out there, she's there as well. So I would have liked to have seen them be a bigger part of this finale. That being said, what we did get was a lot of fun. And of course, Fern and Farrah, Wendell, those are the relationships they focused on. So seeing them come together against Jod, I thought was great. And then seeing KB and SM33 back, all of that is fun. So I enjoyed that for what it was. But I agree with Michael. And as Michael sensed from my opening introduction here, I would have liked a little bit more. But maybe Star Wars is holding off on that, or Lucasfilm is holding off on that because they do have plans and they didn't want to spoil anything. Maybe this is connected to Filoni's film in some way. Maybe there's all I'm not saying I agree with the logic. I'm saying this might have been their logic, but I agree with what Michael's saying. 3 months later, let's see what it's like now. Farrah is probably in charge. Farrah is probably in charge of the planet. Yeah. And so okay, what's her new rule now that she's experienced what she's experienced? What's Farrah doing? What's Fern doing? What's Wim doing? So there's questions. What's KB doing? Is she helping more with the technical, putting all the stuff back together that the droid had been in charge of? Is she putting a new system in place? There's a lot of things we could have checked in on with the kids afterwards with a quick few scenes that I think would have been a little more satisfying for the ending. That being said, seeing the X-Wings and B-Wings flying all around, that was awesome. That was awesome. And seeing the Pirates retreat was so much fun. But yeah, a good season overall. Thoroughly enjoyed what we got. And hopefully there is a second season. I know, Shannon, you alluded to the ratings, but this could be one of those shows where they catch up to it, like Andor. People in the rewatch, now that they've hit the ending, maybe word of mouth will get more people to watch, and then they'll like it and come back and do a second season. Yeah.
This is one that I think, the Star Wars, and I was watching some of the videos of people who typically hate Star Wars stuff now, the hardcore Star Wars fans of everything, and even they are Skeleton Crew is pretty good. And everybody kind of has this it's a shame that Star Wars is in a place where a lot of people who are casual fans or not super fans are not checking out Star Wars shows because the entire thing kind of has this, everyone is and so I do think now that this is done and people are by and large satisfied, I do think those numbers can accumulate. But the good thing about Skeleton Crew is that I hope we get a season 2. I think that there's definitely room. Even if they had done a 3 months later, there's a huge amount of room for story now that Ad-Atten is part of the Republic and tying it into the new trilogy, and even taking some of these characters and building them into whatever Star Wars does next, because I think they're really great characters. The good part about Star Wars as a brand is, even if we don't get a second season, Ad-Atten, Kim, SM33, all of these things are going right into the comic books and the novels and all of the Star Wars stuff that comes out. These are now part of the Star Wars universe, and they're fun parts of the Star Wars universe that are going to get to be used over and over. And even if Skeleton Crew doesn't get a second season and it's just this one season, these 8 episodes, this is a little jewel in the Star Wars universe that I think is going to be something that people continue to come back to and revisit.
Yeah, and it's smart branding. Little kids are going to be dressing up as these Skeleton Crew kids absolutely throughout conventions and what have you. Shannon, final words on this series as we wrap up this spoiler review, because we got to go.
I mean, I hope that, I mean, this is the definition of a show that the whole family can watch and enjoy. So I hope for the folks that did not maybe hop on board right away, I hope that they do discover it, and that this show, that the numbers do improve, and that we do see a second season, because I agree, like, they've left so many interesting threads out there. I would love to see them revisit it.
Yeah. Michael, anything to add as we wrap up?
No, just like, it's been a blast, and they really kind of nailed, in addition to nailing all the 80s and Amblin vibes that they were clearly and obviously going for, which they knocked out of the park, for a show that is so sort of separate in its story from the rest of the Star Wars universe. You know, you get to the end of this episode and you've got a lightsaber, you've got X-Wings, you've got all this stuff, and it's just like, it felt so Star Wars, but in a really fresh and free way, where it didn't feel like it was being bogged down by all of the lore and all of the heaviness and all the stuff. Like, it just felt fresh.
Yep. Evoked the best of the past Star Wars while saying something new and fun and interesting and giving you something fresh. I agree with that 100%. Plus, as someone who hosts these reviews with these two gentlemen, it's nice to see joy coming out of them as we talk about a Star Wars show. So there was so much. So that was a good experience for me. So the series did that as well. Yeah.
And I do think, real quick.
I mean, you're the one that's got to go. So
I got like 2 minutes.
Yeah. All right.
I do think that, you know, when you look at like the two best, Mandalorian aside, when you look at Shannon's camera zooming in very, very close for an extreme close-up. When you look at Andor as something that most people hold up as one of the best Star Wars shows, and then you look at the response to Skeleton Crew, you really do see the two sides of the Star Wars puzzle. Andor is so serious and so heavy, and so dealing with like the realities of the Empire and how oppressive that really feels, and how like bad it really is, and what it takes to be a rebel. And Skeleton Crew is just this really fun romp for kids through the Star Wars universe. And those two pieces together, it's like, that's the yin and the yang of Star Wars. And I think that's, I don't know what anybody can do with that, but if you can manage to take the best of Andor and the best of Skeleton Crew and meld those together, that's your winning Star Wars right there. Yeah.
And I like the character of Jod, like a challenging character, because this is a kid, this is a guy, an adult who has been a hard scrabble life, has had to scrimp and save and try to survive through starving and all of that. So what he does here makes you as a viewer question some of his actions, but you got to put it in context to the kid's upbringing and what he ends up being. Because I think he's stuck in a state of arrested development, which is why he doesn't attack kids or kill kids, but he will attack adults. So I just wonder that. So something to think about as we wrap up. All right. Well, there you go. That's our spoiler review here of episode 8 and the overall series here for Skeleton Crew. Thanks so much for joining us, whether you're watching or listening to us on the podcast feed. Shannon, what do we have to tell them?
Yeah, if you'd like to follow us on social media, on Twitter, it's at Geek_Buddies, on Instagram at _Geek_Buddies. If you'd like to follow me on social media, on Twitter, it's at Shannon_McClung, on Instagram at Shannon the Geek Buddy. If you'd like to follow Mr. Vogel, it is at MK2. And if you'd like to follow Mr. Rocha, it is at The Rocha Says.
Mikey.
After you do all that following, go ahead and smash that like button below. Subscribe to Johnny's Outlaw Nation page. Leave your comments below. What did you think of Wim? What did you think of Fern? What did you think of KB? What did you think of Neil? What did you think of SM33? Let us know below. If you're listening to us on a podcast, go ahead and leave us some stars and some comments so we go up in the rankings. And as always, the best thing you can do is retweet this video, post it on your socials, send it to your friends, and tell them to hang out with your buddies, the Geek Buddies.
There you go. And of course, if you missed we did a show earlier this week, catching up all the stuff from last week. That is available for you to watch or listen to. And we'll have a main show coming up later on this week as well. So look for that from us here on the Geek Buddies. But until then, take care of yourselves, be well, and we'll talk to you next time with a brand new Geek Bites brought to you by the
Geek
Buddies.